thought all game we were really locked in. We played so well together, Brooke. We shared the ball. We shared it. Defensively, we helped each other. The communication was high level. We talked even when we made mistakes. We played so hard that we was able to cover up for it. We hung in there because they got off to a really hot start on that three ball. 7 for 9 in the first quarter. But we weren't playing poor defense. They were making good shots. We were there. I said, just hang in. And then they went a little cold from 3 in the second quarter. I think there was maybe 0 for 12. But we kept playing the same way. We didn't have any turnovers in that first half, which, was incredible for us. We took care of it. And man, I thought DA, to me, it was his best game of the year. In turn, he was just physically imposing out there tonight. He was dominating tonight. He really was. I mean, he crashed glass, offensive rebounds, defensively he was a beast. I was really proud of him. I really was.
Hey, Rip City, this is Scoot Henderson, and it's time to open the briefcase with Casey Holdahl.
Greetings, Pleasure fans, and welcome to The Briefcase, presented by Spirit Mountain Casino. Episode 130 of The Briefcase, presented by Spirit Mountain Casino. I am Casey Holdahl. As you may or may not be able to tell, I am in Miami. The Portland Trail Blazers getting a 3-game road trip off to a great start with a win versus the Miami Heat, coming off of a win to finish off a homestand versus the Chicago Bulls. We'll talk about win versus the Bulls. We'll talk about the win versus the Heat as well. Some lineup changes that Chauncey Billups has made, and check in really quick on where the Trailblazers are at versus the spread on this edition of The Briefcase presented by Spirit Mountain Casino. Well, after having a fairly successful road trip to start 2025, the Blazers came home for a 5-game homestand. Didn't go as well as they would like, losing the first 4 games of that homestand, some of those games really not being all that competitive, though they did salvage the homestand by getting a victory 113-102 versus the Chicago Bulls on Sunday night, a win the Trailblazers desperately needed after losing 5 straight, and a win that came after Chauncey Billups decided to move Shaedon Sharpe to the bench in that game, with both Deni, Avdija, and Jerami Grant coming back into the lineup. Chauncey had a decision to make. What was he going to do in terms of that lineup? Made the decision to put Shaedon Sharpe on the bench. He talked about it a bit at length, actually, discussing the reason why. It sounds like, he's been trying to get more out of Shaedon from a defensive perspective. Wasn't necessarily getting the effort or the execution that he was hoping out of Shaedon on the defensive end. So when the decision came to decide who was going to go to the bench in that lineup, ended up going with Shaedon Sharpe, and it worked. The Trailblazers getting that win 113-102 versus the Bulls, as I mentioned. A very good game up and down the lineup. Scoot Henderson continues to be on an absolute tear in 2025, playing the best basketball of his career thus far. 25 points, 8 assists, 7 rebounds, 2 steals in 38 minutes for Scoot Henderson in the win versus the Bulls. 20 points, 12 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 steals for Deni, who, since coming back, I believe that was his first game back after having that ankle injury, has looked phenomenal. I think there was some concern that ankle injury might have been a little more serious. He did miss a couple games with it, back out there now, and has looked great in his return, which is a fantastic thing for the Trailblazers. I wouldn't say it's exactly as Deni goes, so go the Trailblazers at this point, but it does seem like he has as much of an effect on this team winning or losing on a night-to-night basis as any other player on the roster. And luckily, he's been playing some very good basketball when he's been healthy, and they were able to get that win versus the Bulls in large part, or in partial part at least, to Deni in that game as well. Also had a really good game in Miami, which we'll talk about here in a minute. 18 points for Jerami Grant in his return. Jerami missed over 2 weeks with that facial contusion, finally got back out there and had a great effort. As I mentioned, 18 points, 5 of 11 shooting from the field, 2 of 6 shooting from the three-point line, and 6 of 6 shooting from the free throw line. 15 points, 13 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 blocks for Deandre Ayton, who is also having a very good run as of late. He had some games during that homestand where it didn't look so good. I'm imagining there was probably some discussions both in the locker room and with the coaching staff with Deandre, and he has bounced back with some really good performances. He was great versus the Bulls. He was absolutely fantastic versus the Heat, which, again, we're going to talk about here in a minute. He got singled out for praise, as you just heard there from Chauncey Billups, stating that that was one of DA's best games of the season. In fact, he said it was DA's best game of the season. Arguably, you could say DA's best game as a Trailblazer as well, but either way, really getting some good stuff out of Deandre Ayton. And then Shaedon Sharpe, who had a fantastic game off of the bench, doing exactly what you want to see from a player who, again, I don't even like calling it a demotion, but when you are a starter and you get sent to the bench, that kind of is a demotion. So I guess that's the word I'm going to use. But his response was fantastic. 23 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists in 33 minutes on 8 of 18 shooting for Shaedon Sharpe in the win versus the Bulls. And looked much more engaged on the defensive end. And I think the exact same thing on Tuesday night versus the Heat. That's tonight. I'm trying to not use timely terms, but that was tonight versus the Heat. And so Chauncey making that decision really seems to have sparked a bit of a change in Shaedon Sharpe. So going to the bench seems like Chauncey has gotten exactly what he was hoping to get out of Shaedon Sharpe. There's basically two ways that can go. A player can either get mad about it and let that anger turn into being upset and then letting it affect his play, or you can take that as a challenge and then go out and perform better. And Shaedon has done the latter. He is absolutely rededicated himself on the defensive end. At least that's how it looks. And he is not going out there. He's not pouting. He's not, making complaints. He's not talking to guys in the locker room about how unfair things are. He's just going out there and competing, and he's done a great job of it. Shaedon too, not exactly the loudest guy in the locker room, a very kind of, I wouldn't say he keeps to himself, but he's a bit of a quiet guy, and Shaedon's not the kind of guy who's going to make problems in a locker room, like maybe you want him to be more talkative at times. Maybe you want him to be more emotive at times. But that also has a benefit too, which is when, things maybe aren't going as well, or maybe when, other guys might cause a problem because they get sent to the bench. Shaedon has just taken it. And not only has he just taken it, but he is really seems like he has responded in the way you would hope a young player would respond to that kind of challenge. So, I think you really have to give a lot of credit to Shaedon for the way he's played. I think you got to give a lot of credit to Chauncey for making that decision. That's something where, in today's NBA, teams are very reticent to do anything with players in which they feel like they're not punishing the player. I mean, again, punishing is not the right way to put it, but even doing any kind of hard coaching, a lot of times it feels like in the current NBA, teams just, they're so afraid that the way a player is going to take that I think it probably stops them from doing things that they feel like they should, that they otherwise would. So I think you really do have to give a lot of credit to Chauncey for him to make that decision and to stick with it because, and also to talk about that decision as well. I mean, it would have been easy enough when Chauncey was asked who was going to start in that game versus the Bulls to say, hey, with both Deni and Jerami back, I'm going to keep those guys in the lineup with Tumani and see how that goes. He could have just said that and not talked at all about Shaedon, but instead he kind of discussed the reason why he was making that move. He was fairly honest with the media that it was something that he had been talking with Shaedon with for a while, and it wasn't necessarily getting the results he was hoping for. And so he decided to make that decision. And again, a lot of coaches nowadays wouldn't even talk about that. They wouldn't even make the decision, and then they definitely wouldn't talk about the reason why they made that decision. So I think you really got to give a lot of credit to Chauncey, and again, a lot of credit to Shaedon as well for taking that in the manner in which it was delivered and in which Chauncey wanted it to come across. He talked about that pregame in Miami that, you know, he really feels like guys like Shaedon, guys like Scoot can be stars in this league. And for them to reach that potential, they need someone to be honest with them about the things they need to improve upon before it gets to a point where that's kind of the player they are. And you really get the sense from Chauncey that like he's being honest about that. It's not necessarily, I mean, obviously Chauncey wants the team to play better, but it really seems like it's more about, hey, I care about these guys. I want them to be successful going forward in their careers. And I'm going to do some things for them that I'm glad people did for me. Or I'm going to do some things for them that I wish someone would have done for me. And I think part of that is, again, being honest with his players and, you know, trying to coach them up and, giving them maybe a little tough love about kind of some of the things that they do or don't do that they can improve upon. And again, in today's NBA, there's, a lot of times no one wants to be the guy that speaks honestly with players. And, in some respects you understand it. And I do think that in general, it is better to have a softer touch with players, and the whole kind of like the head coach is the dictator and what he says goes, and anyone who says anything otherwise can find someplace else to be. Like that's not a good way to operate. It doesn't work anymore anyways. But there's also a balance between, being militant about kind of the way you're going to run a team and really kind of letting things slide because you're afraid of what the reaction is going to be from your players or from their agents if you have to actually, be a little honest in a sense that takes on a certain, I don't know what the best way to put it is, maybe harshness to it. Like if you have to actually deliver a message to a player that is not necessarily positive and knowing that is maybe going to upset that player, I feel like a lot of organizations, a lot of coaches these days, that's something that like they just don't want to have to deal with anymore. And so they just kind of let stuff slide. Chauncey's not letting stuff slide at this point in time, and I think that I give him a lot of credit for that because again, other guys, other coaches, other teams would be fine to just kind of lets that stuff go. I think Chauncey actually, being a former player and I think probably seeing himself in some of these young guys, I think he wants to do that not only again just for the Portland Trailblazers, but really for those individual players. So a lot of credit to Chauncey, a lot of credit to Shaedon, and it worked. When you make a change like that, and if they had not won that game versus the Bulls, then the reaction to that is like, well, you shouldn't have put Shaedon on the bench. What a bad move. So the fact that they did get the win versus the Bulls, I think gave Chauncey a little bit of an ability to kind of stick with it, which is what he ended up doing. So they do get that win 113-102 versus the Bulls on Saturday before heading out Monday to start a 3-game trip that began here in Miami. So the Trailblazers get that win versus the Bulls on Sunday night, and then Monday morning, first thing, board a flight to Miami, 5.5-hour flight to get to Miami, have the day off, though it's not really an off day because you're traveled, and it's the second night of a back-to-back as well, which second night of a back, or after a back-to-back, you usually always have that next day off anyways. That day isn't really an off day. It ends up being a travel day, a long travel day at that. Team gets to Miami, doesn't have a shoot around before the game on Tuesday, ends up coming out though and having one of their best performances of the season, 116-107 to defeat the Miami Heat on their home court for their third road win of the month of January. Even without Toumani Camara, the second time, actually, unfortunately for Toumani, he broke his rib and lacerated his kidney last season before we playing Miami. As some of you may or may not recall, Toumani Camara obviously is from Belgium, but prepped in Miami, just in one of the suburbs here, played his high school ball here in hopes of getting a college scholarship, which is what happened. Ended up playing very well, ends up going to Georgia and then transferring to Dayton. So Toumani was very excited to play in the game versus Miami, had a bunch of people in the building. Unfortunately, came down with the illness that a lot of people are getting these days, was not able to play in the game versus the Miami Heat, but the Trailblazers were able to get the win nonetheless. Toumani hasn't missed many games this year. He misses this one. Blazers end up getting it 116-107, again, with one of their better performances of the season. 22 points, 15 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal for Deandre Ayton, who, again, as I mentioned, Chauncey Billups really singled DeAndre out for praise. DeAndre having one of his better games as a Trailblazer. What ends up happening in that game too is, the Heat come out shooting really well from three and then go absolutely cold from three. I think missed 17 or 19 straight 3-pointers in the game. Trailblazers able to build a lead, outscore the Heat by 10 in the second quarter, and then by 12 in the third quarter, go up by as many as 27 points. And then you get to the fourth quarter and you kind of know what's going to happen. The game's going to get tight. The officiating is going to get even tighter. And they're going to start hitting some shots. The Heat, 3-pointers. It's exactly what happened. Game gets close. Trailblazers able to stick that one out to get the 9-point victory. As I mentioned, 22 points, 15 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal for DeAndre Ayton in one of his better games as a Trailblazer in 34 minutes. DeAndre took a little bit of a knock on his knee at the end of the game, was pretty sore in the locker room. So I'm a bit curious what his status is going to be for the games versus the Magic and the Hornets. But turning in, again, one of his best performances as of late. Anfernee Simons, after missing the game versus the Bulls with I believe an elbow injury, elbow or wrist, I don't recall just now, looked no worse for wear Tuesday night in Miami. 24 points on 9 of 20 shooting from the field, 6 of 12 shooting from three to go with 4 rebounds, 3 assists, and a block in 35 minutes. Ant really doing a great job in that game in the fourth quarter, getting an and one, missed the free throw. But when the Blazers were really struggling to score, managed to get into the paint, get up his little floater, and got a really tough one to go. I wouldn't say that didn't cement the game, but that they were at a point where it was really starting to look like it probably wasn't going to go Portland's direction, and getting just enough to get the Blazers over the top in that one, 24 points. A very nice effort for Anfernee Simons. 18 points, 2 rebounds, and an assist for Jerami Grant. Really had it going in the first half, kind of tailed off a little bit offensively in the second half, but Jerami doing a great job in that one as well. Deni, another great game, another double-double for Deni, 16 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists, and 2 steals for Deni in 39 minutes. Had a couple important plays in the fourth quarter as well. Rob Williams, didn't necessarily put up a ton of stats, 2 points, 4 rebounds, and a block, but in his 14 minutes really made an impact defensively on that side of the court. And then Scoot Henderson getting the start in place of Toumani Camara. I think a lot of people assumed that Shaedon would probably get the start positionally. Chauncey Billups deciding to go with Scoot Henderson. Another really nice game for Scoot as well. 11 points on 4 of 8 shooting from the field, 2 of 5 shooting from 3, 8 assists, and 2 rebounds in 34 minutes. Scoot has been fantastic during the month of January. We're going to catch up with him sometime here soon, probably sometime on the second half of this trip. Shooting better than 50% from the field, better than 40% from 3 in the month of January. I think scoring about 15.2 points. I think averaging about 5.5, 6 assists, 3 or so rebounds, but just looks really comfortable out there right now, and really seems like he's starting to understand the pace of the NBA and how to best use his speed, but also understanding that sometimes it makes more sense to slow down than to speed up. I feel like Scoot's done a really good job of that. Obviously, when your shot is falling, it really opens up things both for yourself and for your teammates, and that's what we're seeing out of Scoot right now too. When he is a threat from 3, it really opens up the rest of his game. If you have to crash out to Scoot at the 3-point line, that really allows him to get into the paint. That's where he's the most comfortable. He's also shooting, I think, like 72% in the paint unrestricted area in the month of January as well, which a lot of that is because when he's able to hit that outside shot, when teams have to respect him from 3, it allows him to get into the paint without having 2 or 3 guys there to meet him, because they know that he's probably not going to rise up for the 3. So that's been really helpful for Scoot. And then just having another guy on the floor who can reliably hit the 3-point shot really opens up things for guys like Deni. It opens up things for guys like Jerami. It opens up looks in the paint for DA, opens up 3-pointers for Ant as well, and takes some of the pressure off of Ant in terms of the way that opposing teams play him. They know that generally Ant is the most dynamic scorer on the team, a knockdown 3-point shooter, particularly from his spots. And that allows teams to send multiple players at Ant if they feel like they don't need to defend Scoot on the 3-point line. But when they do, which as of right now you have to, that really opens things up for Ant too. And I think we've seen an uptick in some of his numbers, I think because of some of the attention that Scoot is getting now that he is hitting that 3-point shot more consistently. Hopefully he's able to keep that up. I asked Chauncey about it. His mechanics have changed a little bit as well. So it's not even just like he's just kind of on a hot streak. Some of the things he's been working on in terms of kind of keeping his feet quiet and, being set when he's taking shots, really knowing what shots to take and maybe what shots to pass up. Scoot is not a guy, he's not kind of an off the dribble, fade away 3-point guy right now. He's more of kind of a set guy. And I think he's realized that and is doing a better job of being discerning about which of those shots he should take. I really feel like we've really seen a different level of Scoot as of late. And if he's able to keep that up, that's going to do great things for this team. Again, he had a really good night versus the Miami Heat as well. A nice night for Shaedon Sharpe too. 12 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists in 28 minutes for Shaedon, once again coming off the bench and really making a difference for this team. And Delano Banton, who, has been a little quiet as of late. He had that fall a couple weeks ago, missed a few games. has kind of been in and out of the lineup since then. Had a really nice game on Tuesday night in Miami. 11 points, 3 rebounds, an assist, and a block in 17 minutes. Delano doing, as he always does, a great job of getting into the paint, forcing teams to make decisions whether or not to contest at the paint, at the rim, or if they're going to flex out to their guy if Delano's going to find him. So, a really nice game all the way up and down the roster. They got something from her. Even Jabari, even in 6 minutes, really played some important minutes down the stretch for the Trailblazers. And as I mentioned, Robert Williams, 14 minutes. Had a great block in transition, had a lob dunk as well. Really doing a nice job of picking his spots and having an impact in games, even in limited minutes. And that's something we've talked about with a guy like Chris Murray. But when you have a guy like Robert Williams who has a lot of talent and who's been in the league for a while, now that he's, I think, starting to trust his body a little bit. Actually, I won't say trust it, because I think Rob's always trusted his body, but now that he's just had a run of decent health, uh, I think you're really starting to see some of the things that Rob can do, even in limited minutes. Like when he gets out there, he always has an impact. It always makes a difference in his minutes. I think we saw that actually versus the Bulls as well, and we definitely saw it versus the Heat. So just a really nice win for the Trailblazers, 2 consecutive wins for this team to get, as I mentioned, their third road win of January. That's as many road wins as they had in November and December combined, and October, or whatever the first part of October was as well there. So Blazers playing some decent basketball right now, and even it doesn't always result in a win, but they have, as of late, after, I would say the middle of that homestand. I think, the Nets game was not a great one. And I think since then they've kind of the bounce back that we've been accustomed to seeing after they have bad games took a little bit longer this time, but it really seems to have come now on this road trip. So they do get the win versus the Heat to start this trip, and then finish off this trip versus the Magic and the Charlotte Hornets. Back-to-back games on Thursday and Friday. Team will probably have, well, Wednesday will be a travel day, not all that far. It's a pretty quick flight from Miami to Orlando. Might have a quick practice, but I imagine at this point it's really more just about, the Blazers are in a run right now where they're playing a lot of games over, not that many nights. We talked about that on a previous edition of the Briefcase, that they were going to be entering a stretch of the season where we're playing a couple back-to-backs. You have, again, you're flying all the way out to the East Coast for 3 games, so that kind of takes it out of you. You lose your off day after a back-to-back because you're traveling. So, a lot of games, a lot condensed down into not all that much time. So at a certain point, it really becomes more about kind of preserving your players' legs and less about, getting a lot more work on the court. Which is probably one of the reasons why Rayan Rupert, they assigned Rayan to the remix that played on Monday, and they have another game on Wednesday. I think knowing there probably wasn't going to be a whole lot of practice time for a guy like Rayan, who's out of the rotation right now, the decision was made like, hey, why don't we just leave Rayan in Portland, let him play a couple of games of the remix, and then when we get back to town, he'll just come back to the Blazers. Which is a smart way to use the G League, and particularly for a guy like Rayan who wants to play. Like, I think some guys might be like, the trip to Miami, Orlando, like, I don't get to go on that trip. Rayan's not that kind of guy. Like, he wants to play. He wants to get better. He's about the work. And so for Rayan to stay back in Portland and get some run with the remix, I think was probably something that he wanted to do, and something that's going to be beneficial for him, because there's just not going to be all that many opportunities on this road trip in order to get practice time. And with Jerami and Deni both coming back, there's kind of a minutes crunch there at that position. I mean, Chris Murray didn't play in the game versus the Heat because of a chest contusion. But even if he was available, I don't know that he would have played. They already went 9 deep. So it makes sense that they decided to do that early on. And again, I think it also shows too that, like, hey, we're going to make some decisions that we feel like are going to be best for the player long term. Maybe they're not going to love it in the short term, though. For Rayan, I don't think he minds that at all. But even if he did, I think it's very easy to tell the player, like, hey, it's better for you to be here and play and have an opportunity to get some run in with the remix than it is to get to hang out in Miami for a couple nights and not see the court other than in shoot around, which we're not even having shoot around. So basically, whatever your pregame workout is, and then just getting on flights and not getting a chance to get run in. So they're making some decisions right now to put themselves in a good position going forward. And I think those decisions have worked, from putting Shaedon on the bench to maybe kind of trying to get more minutes to Scoot to assigning Rayan to the G League. A lot of those things seem to be having positive impacts on this team, which, is great to see. And that just goes to show that, the coaching staff is willing to make some changes and to try some things out that, maybe at other points in time and other parts of the season or other seasons they wouldn't have done. So, I think that shows quite a bit of growth, and I think it's been really good for the team. And, one of the results in this one is that you get a really good win against a Miami Heat team that has been tough on the Blazers as of late. Obviously, the Heat have some of their own issues going on right now. A lot of debate about whether or not this might have been the last game for some people on that team. I think you guys have probably seen that the Suns and the Jazz made a trade where they swapped some picks, and now the Suns have more picks than the Jazz are getting unprotected pick in like 7 years from now. I think the assumption is that moves like that are made to kind of set up other moves. Take that as you will. I obviously don't have any information on that whatsoever, but I have worked in the NBA for a long time. I generally kind of know how things tend to shake out. So I think there might be some validity to those assumptions. But as for the Trailblazers, playing some pretty good basketball right now, kind of coming together a little bit as a team, and I think that's been great to see. We're out here on the road, and we do stay at quite a few nice places, but none of these places have anything on Spirit Mountain Casino that has a variety of rooms from lavish premium suites to charming classic standards. The hotel at Spirit Mountain Casino has a type of room for everybody, just like the room here that I'm staying in right now in Miami. All their rooms have all the essentials from high-speed Wi-Fi to 24-hour front desk service. You can choose the room that best suits you and book your stay now at Spirit Mountain Casino, Highway 18 in Grand Ronde. Elevate your game. If you're looking for a way to get out of town, spend a nice little weekend, Grand Ronde is a great place to do that. Spirit Mountain Casino. Book a room, play some slots, play some cards, check out some of the great dining, check out the Top Golf Suite as well. I'm sure there's concerts going on all the time at Spirit Mountain Casino. Always worth checking out. It's always a good time at Spirit Mountain Casino on Highway 18. Elevate your game. All right, before we wrap up this edition of the Briefcase presented by Spirit Mountain Casino, I want to get into our betting on the Blazers segment. The Trailblazers are now 22-20-1 versus the spread this season after going 2-1 versus the spread in their last 3 games. They were 10.5-point dogs to the Rockets and lost by 22. They were 4.5-point dogs to the Bulls and ended up winning that game by 11. And they were 8.5-point dogs to the Miami Heat on Tuesday night and ended up winning that game by 9. To go, as I mentioned, 2-1 versus the spread in their last 3 games. And also, with 15 wins now, the Trailblazers are 65% of the way to hitting the over on their projection of 22.5 wins this season, which was set at the start of the season by the odds makers in Las Vegas and wherever else they're making odds at these days. And the fact that the Blazers are just over 50% of the way through their 2024-25 season means they are well ahead in terms of hitting that win projection. As we've talked about, schedule gets tougher here. Blazers tend to not win as many games towards the end of the season, or at least they haven't as of late, particularly when they're going up against teams that are still in the playoff hunt. Trailblazers not expected to be in the playoff hunt this year. Something would really have to change dramatically for them to get into that hunt. So you understand why they're not going to win probably as many games towards the end of the season as maybe some other teams might. But either way, they are well ahead of schedule in terms of hitting that over. They have 15 wins. They need to get to 23 wins to hit the over. So basically, they have 40 games to win 8 games, which, is possible. It also could not happen. Neither one would surprise me necessarily, but either way, they are ahead of schedule, and they have been doing a pretty good job with the spread as of late, which for my folks at home, I mostly assume you are betting on the Blazers, and if that is actually the case, I'm glad you're getting wins, and if you're betting against a team, okay. There's some validity to that as well. I know some people that feel like, hey, if the team's going to lose, I at least want to have something good to feel good about. But I don't know. I'd rather just roll with the team I'm a fan of. And that's going to do it for this edition of The Briefcase presented by Spirit Mountain Casino. Thank you so much for joining me as always. As I mentioned, we'll continue on this road trip, head back to Portland for an extended homestand after games versus the Orlando Magic on Wednesday and is that right? No. Versus the Magic on Thursday and the Bobcats, Hornets on Friday. Heading back to Portland at that point in time for an extended homestand, but a chance to finish out this road trip and, with a little bit of momentum. So we'll see what they're able to do in Orlando and Charlotte. So I'll probably talk to you once we get back to Portland. Thanks so much for joining me. As always, please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to The Briefcase, The Blazers Balcony, and Section 113, all members of the Trailblazers Audio Network. Thank you so much for joining me. I am Casey Holdahl. Go Blazers.